Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Kruger, Senior Manager for Content at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and welcome to this month's Living with Parkinson's Meetup. In this series, this great panel of folks that live with Parkinson's are going to share how Parkinson's impacts their lives and what they do to live well with Parkinson's. We're going to welcome a couple of new panelists today. So before we go a little bit further into this meetup, I just want to give a chance for the two new folks to introduce themselves. So, Greg, can you just say hello and give us a sense of a little bit of your Parkinson's experience so far?
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. And thank you for including me on the panel. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Dr. Greg Bush. I live in Tucson, Arizona. I've had Parkinson's with young onset for about 24 years. So the last 10 years have been the most difficult, but I keep very active. I had a very active life before, and Parkinson's did tell me it was time to shift direction. So I reinvented myself and dedicated my work now to Parkinson's and with Davis Phinney and other organizations and so forth and so on. So I'm very happy. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm really delighted to be here. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding my experience and my life and what I do to help myself be happy in this situation, especially in the fact that I'm way down the road on this. So anyway,
Well,
thank you,
thanks for
Chris.
being here, Greg. I appreciate you joining us, and it's great to have you on board. Robert, also glad that you're on board. So, can you say hello and give us a sense where you're calling in from, what your circumstances as far as Parkinson's goes?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon. My name's Robert Turner. I live in New Orleans. I'll be 65 in about 2 weeks. I've had Parkinson's or been diagnosed with Parkinson's about 5.5 years. And of course, like most of us, have symptoms before that. I also became a Davis Phinney ambassador about 9 months ago, and I'm working with our other local ambassador, Michelle Lane, who many of you may know.
Yes.
But I've also taken on a particular interest in outreach to LGBT people with Parkinson's. And I now have or there is now a Zoom group that's meeting weekly for LGBT people with Parkinson's and their caregivers. That's my main focus in my activism with Parkinson's.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Glad to have you here with us. Thanks for joining. And yeah, I wanted to draw attention to one other little detail here. We previously on earlier meetups we would introduce all the panelists, but moving forward, we're going to invite you to visit a link to our website that has all the panelists bios and also a contact, some ways that you can contact them if you have an interest in doing that. So that'll give us some more time to talk and share information about Parkinson's and our experience. So that'll maybe we hope that'll be an improvement for everyone. So this month, we're going to be talking about how living with Parkinson's has impacted love and relationships in our lives. And, I want to just draw attention to the fact that we're a romantic bunch, maybe, but we're not going to stay focused only on romantic love or physical intimacy in the sense of that type of love. We may go there, but we may also talk about the relationship between family members, sisters, siblings, brothers, parents, children, anything. We may go to any of these relationships because Parkinson's can affect them all, as we know. Before we get into the topic properly today, I just want to draw attention to something that is maybe some difficult news. Late last month, our friend and panelist Doug Reed, a longtime member of the panel, he passed away following an emergency while he was traveling with family. And this was hard news for a lot of us. It was very sudden, completely unexpected. And I want to just say a couple things about this off the bat. Doug was super generous. He was quietly gracious. He was really extraordinarily kind. The first time I talked to Doug, I felt like we were brothers immediately. It was wild. It was such a great experience to get to connect with Doug. And I just want to say that, a couple days before I learned that Doug had passed away, he had been sending me pictures from his trip. He'd been traveling with some family members. And he had sent me pictures. He took a helicopter tour over some waterfalls. He had sent me pictures of whales that he had seen on a tour that he had taken on a boat. And so Doug was just having this really great experience. And he seemed like he was having a great trip, and there was a lot of beauty for him on that trip. Um, Today's topic is important to Doug. Doug is going to permeate maybe some pieces of this conversation because of how important this topic was to him. You know, I guess I just want to say we're going to miss Doug, and this is a problem that we are all going to face at some point. You know, I don't know what to say about it. Frankly, it's hard. It's hard to lose a friend, and I'll personally miss Doug quite a lot. So, given that this topic's important to Doug, and given that Doug was such a huge impact on my life personally, and I think on a lot of people's lives that are associated with this meetup, I think we can take that with us today into this conversation and start by thinking about how Parkinson's has made relationships more challenging or maybe easier. And my experience connecting with Doug was a great benefit to me, and it was something that happened through Parkinson's, and that's a blessing that Parkinson's brought to my life. Even though now I'm going to miss him for moving forward, but I'm grateful for having known him. I'm deeply grateful for that. So, panelists, and maybe Karen, can we start with you? Can you say a little bit about how Parkinson's has impacted your experience of relationships, and maybe if you have something to share about Doug, you can do that as well.
Doug was a good friend, and it's really hard. I do want to honor him, and I want to think about him. And what I think of when it comes to relationships, and love and friendships, and I really want to focus on not romantic and love, and why this community, my experience of having Parkinson's and living in a community and really engaging in a community, which Doug was really important to Doug as well, is this concept of intimacy and how we get to know each other on such a deep level. There's just a connection here where sometimes you don't have to speak, but you understand. And I think for me, my relationship with Doug there was always like a coming home or a welcome to a friendship. And it happened so quickly. And as quickly as we get to know someone, it's also a loss over and over again. This is something I was thinking about watching all your friends and loved ones with Parkinson's when you're engaged in this community. It's like you're losing a little bit of them a little bit at a time. And I personally was just sort of shocked, and it's a little bit, well, it is upsetting right now to think about, but I also feel like in relationship, we have an obligation to honor and love, and that love continues through difficult times in the relationship as well, and end of life. And we deal with these issues deeply. But I will say that relationship and love and Doug, that really meant a lot to Doug. He spent a lot of his time being in relationship with others and wanting to be close with others. And so I think that's something very special about him. And he would want to be a part of this conversation. So I want y'all to know that. That's all, really.
Well, and if I can jump in, that kind of fits well with how I met Doug, because I went down to visit the offices down there after COVID, and it was just Rich, the financial director we had for Davis Phinney till recently, and Polly, and Doug was in there, and they were folding envelopes, and Doug just said, "Oh yeah, I live nearby, so I come by and help." And it must have been at least 2 different times I flew down there, and Doug was in the office helping. He was just doing the little stuff, getting this stuff done that had to get done. And he always did it with a smile.
I think we can partly honor him by really getting into the weeds a little bit about this disease, and how Karen made a really, really good point that loving people with Parkinson's, and a lot of us love a lot of people with Parkinson's, and those that love us, our care partners and our families, and our spouses, if you're married, or your partners, or your children, or your nieces and nephews. I think it is hard that the idea of kind of incremental loss is hard to live with for anybody living with us. And I think that that can be impactful on our relationships, whether it's you know, our our love interests or our connecting with friends. And I know for me personally, one of the biggest challenges has been that um, I love a lot and I love hard and I love a lot of people. And as my world has needed to get smaller, I have less energy to overtly love as many people. And so, and I think I'm trying to, I was talking actually with a friend this morning on the phone about defining my core values and realizing that my circle may be getting smaller, but it doesn't mean my love is getting smaller. And that, but I think that that is the reality of sometimes needing to refocus and step back. So, as somebody who tends to lead with her heart, and I always have, um, I I think I want people to know that I still love just as hard. I just can't act on my love as much. And I think grief, I think it's an honor here that we all get the opportunity to feel grief because it's the flip side of loving.
I think that one thing about Parkinson's is that we have developed a special tie to the issue of loving one another. We're living with a chronic illness, and for me, I found great peace because I tell every one of my friends and family every time I leave them that I love them. And this is it's Parkinson's has heightened that for me in my awareness. And I think if we can say there was something good that came out of this experience for me, it was the fact that it highlighted the intimacy that I have with my friends and my family, as well as how we express and value, I should say, love and how it enriches our lives. Too often we're so busy in the real world that we forget to tell people that we love them. And I think that that's one of the things that Parkinson's has brought to the forefront of our minds.
I very much, like Greg, had that experience of I mean, I'm in my 30s still, so the first time I ever took a real hard look at my own fragility and mortality was with the diagnosis, because I never had a reason to before that. And it really put a lot of things in perspective. And if I decided kind of early on, if I'm gonna give up things I can't do to like maintain energy to do things I want to do, the first thing I gave up was a lot of like that pretense, and that I just kind of went all in with the vulnerability piece, and everyone wasn't real comfortable with it. And people have left my life, and I'm really open with everyone, and I talk regularly, hey, this is what I'm losing. This is where I'm struggling. I need you to do this. If I'm in the evenings, I struggle to stay engaged in conversation. If you don't wait for me, I'm going to withdraw. I'm just really, really open about my needs, and I'm really open about the way that I feel. And it's just kind of, this is what you get. And it's made some things different, take an adjustment, but it means that now all of my relationships are really, really meaningful. And back to the community piece, I've not been in this community long, and I've already felt a lot of that loss. So I see where it could feel really heavy. And I've never been a part of a community that so readily just took me in and what do you need? And so I get to give back to the community, and the community is regularly giving back to me. And what a cool space to be in. real crappy disease, but what an amazing community.
Yeah, if I can jump in real quick, I think the first time I went to a conference for Parkinson's, and I was really afraid and really thinking it was going to be horrible, and it was amazing, and people opened up, and I think that's one thing that this disease allows us is a chance to drop all the pretenses. I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, because I saw that at every conference I've ever gone to, and I've been dealing with the disease for 12 years now. So I think that's the thing about people when they get a chronic disease. I saw it with my wife with cancer too. People get in there, they just open up right away, and it normalizes us.
I think what Parkinson did for me is it forced me to have a different relationship with myself to start off with, because I think that is the basis of where we go with our relationships and love and support. I mean, you know, you wake up and you've got to deal with it. And I found in my early days that whatever I was expressing was mirrored in my family support. And I think as I got to go through the stages of grief, so my care, you know, my partner, my spouse, my children did the same. And I became much better and recalibrated when I accepted Parkinson's and then started living with it, because as I started doing that, that was reflected in my family as well. So I think the relationship starts with us ourselves, but I, you know, I'm very connected with the community, because there's some things that I've shared with some of you, and in these webinars we talk about things that I sometimes don't talk to my spouse, and I just wanted to say that the support is there for me to do that and feel comfortable doing that and learning and contributing on how to deal with a few things which I can then take to my outward relationships.
Yeah, Karen.
My heart goes to the folks in our community that aren't comfortable with that outreach, and it feels like foreign land to them. And I just want to let those people know that we can be that for you. We are here, and that's what that's what I'm here for, is to not just experience the community, but offer out a hand that for those that don't feel comfortable with that, and it's scary and difficult. If you give it a try with us, I think you'll find a little piece of that love, and we are open to that. So I want to share that with the community, larger community, not just this panel.
Karen, if I could jump in, I totally agree with you. And it may be an odd thing for me to say, but Parkinson's may have made me a much better person. It caused me to get in touch with myself and my friends and the people that I love in a way that we normally just discard in our daily lives. And for me, I said earlier that I'm very happy. I have no regrets in life. And a couple of years ago, I made a concerted effort to reach out to people who I thought maybe at some point in my life I might have offended them or hurt them in some way. And I sought their forgiveness. And I have forgiven everybody who's ever hurt me. I have no, and so my heart's full of love. I don't allow those kinds of things to burden me and regret. We don't like to talk about our mortality, but I will say this about it. The last thing I want is to be laying there in bed and thinking about all the things I wished I had done, or the things that I regretted, or that I didn't tell somebody that I loved them. So I do it every day, and how enriching and how powerful it is for me and them. And so I think the relationship between love and Parkinson's is it's very entwined. And I think that in many ways, Parkinson's helps us reach into ourselves and find that that connection. So I love what you had to say, and as well as Larry had some very positive comments. I think it's terrific. So anyway, thank you.
I think that this conversation has been really interesting. I think back when I first got Parkinson's and the idea of, well, it's just a miserable disease. It's going to get worse and worse. How am I going to deal with it? And then thinking about, what are some of the positive aspects of the disease? I think this discussion today has really emphasized what positive things can come from having a disease. I mean, we don't want to have the disease, but we can really get some positives. I think people have really expressed well, the fact that it can really be positive in a lot of ways. Personally, I've had a very professional life and didn't spend a lot of time socializing, but since I got Parkinson's and I quit my job, I'm in the community. I'm, like Karen says, I'm helping other people. I'm trying to find ways to help, and I'm making a lot more contacts and a lot more interactions that are meaningful than in the past. So I'm not sure it's all Parkinson's, but I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yes.
I would like to add a little thing about what Stan, Karen, well, all of us are feeling. The opposite of opening up ourselves into love is self-destruction. I have a person that reached out to me that they said their parent has just been diagnosed, and this person is behaving, it's really destructing, they're this, I can't say the word. they're Thank you. They're having issues with themselves. They're drinking late. They're coming home at awful times. They're pushing their family away. And that is exactly what happens when you do not choose love and you do not choose acceptance. Here's this poor person's family that wants to wrap their arms around this person because they love them so much, but they're just receiving push and hate. And that is such a bad way to live.
And at the same time, that's also part of Parkinson's.
Right. That's the hard thing, is that your instinct, because of the way that Parkinson's operates within your body, your instinct is going to be to withdraw, to pull away, to not get involved, to not reach out. And something about that act of stepping over that and leaning into the reaching out, people just start coming in, and it makes a big difference. But that first initial step is really, really tough. And then even short into this, I realized that as soon as things change, you have to take the step again. So it's not like a one-time thing. Every time something changes, you have to do it again.
That's correct.
Yeah. I don't want to take too much time, but something you said, Nicole, just resonates with me, because I think a lot of us have parts of ourselves that can be self-defeating. And I know for me it has, but I learned dealing with addiction and alcoholism and how that interacts with my life with Parkinson's, that the opposite of addiction or self-destructive behavior is connection. And when I first heard that, I was like, what are you talking about? But it's true, because when you're absorbed with yourself and you're not able to reach outward, it's self-destruction is a negative form of connection. And I think that I don't know, it just struck me to share that with people, because I know not everybody here is like, oh, love, when it all seems great. I'm thinking about the person out there that's like struggling, with that. So I want to give other people a chance, but
Yeah, and Karen, I part of what I've tried to learn, Shan, you were so good at it right away. This is who I am and this is how I'm feeling. It took me a long time to be able to say that. And what I have shared with my friends and family is that when I'm feeling pretty rotten or going through a bumpy patch or grieving, I will pull back. And so I give you permission to check in. And I may be resistant, but it feels good to be checked on. And the talking about it part in the moment when it's feeling hard is not my strong point. But once I'm back in and re-engaging, making the next step, like Shan said, and re-engaging, sometimes I will share that. But it's hard to talk about.
Someone just said in the chat that it's hard to stay positive every day. And so I just want to clarify that I am absolutely not positive every day. I think what I try to do is stay open. I don't try to stay positive. I try to stay open. I try to connect when I can't hold myself above water. I try to connect to someone that I've predefined that is ready to hear that connection, to help me get out of that. So I will arrange with people. If I'm struggling, can you be this for me? When I'm struggling, can you do that for me? And then when I'm struggling, I don't have to think about it. People are just there ready because I designed it that way. That leaning into community space and recognizing that you can't do it on your own, and you're sure not going to be positive every single day.
Shan, if I could jump in real quick, I find it real interesting when we use the term every day, because for me, maybe you all are different, but it's not every day. It's every day that I have different times during that day that I'm very appreciative, very happy, and other times I'm very disappointed. And I want to go back to a point that Kat said about how she prefers to retreat in to herself. Okay, for me, it's like man flu. So we all know that that anytime a man gets a cold, it's terminal for them. So for me, I have to admit, Kat, that when I'm having a bad day, I I become very, very needy, and I need my wife with me, even if she just sits there. Now, I'm fortunate because I'm married to a woman who is a Parkinson's expert and works in a Parkinson's center, ironically. But it's not really as easy sometimes, because sometimes she just tells me, "You're not doing Parkinson's right," and and so and but. I so respect what you had to say, but we can see how it can go in two separate directions very easily when we have difficult days, or difficult periods within the day. So anyway, but again, I want to sort of revert it back to the subject of today's conversation, and that's about love and intimacy. And not only is that love, but if my wife sits and just holds my hand, just holds my hand, or someone's there, or just gives me a hug. There's an intimacy about that. And I have a thing about me that when I get down and get anxious, I can't pull myself out of it. But I have a couple of friends who I send them a code, and this is crazy. All they have to say to me is, "It's going to be okay." And you realize that my anxiety level goes from here to here over something as silly as that, but it works.
I don't think that's silly at all. I think that knowing and being clear about what your needs are, it's having a touch point, and it's people essentially saying that we care about you and that we're
Yes.
here. And I think that's beautiful. And I think sometimes it needs to be that simple, because the feeling, that anxious feeling, that hard feeling, feels
Right.
really lonely, no matter how many people can be around you, maybe, right? It can feel really isolating. And I'd love to touch on something that you said, Greg, and that is about intimacy, right? A lot of people think intimacy is the act of having sex. And there is so much more to intimacy. There's intimacy over a text message, touching the hand, your wife even telling you that you're doing Parkinson's wrong. There's a level of intimacy there, let's face it. But
It's
sitting
just,
with a friend, I can tell you that Sri and I have had hours on the phone of connecting and just being there for one another without really saying anything, and that's intimate. Um, uh, same with you, Karen. We've all had some of that with each other. So we need intimacy in our lives.
Yeah, I want to
We
draw
absolutely
attention to
do.
something that yeah, I'm pointing to you, Sheree, in a second. So I'm gonna get to you because I think that Jackie said something in the chat that was about how hard it is when your ability to communicate with your voice becomes impacted by Parkinson's. And I was just thinking about Shri in that context, not because of a speech challenge that you're facing, but that you've had to interact with so many new people lately. And I know that there's so many challenges with that in terms of facial masking, in terms of just communicating generally. And I wonder how that's going for you in terms of the new relationships that you're starting. But I also don't want to distract from whatever you had to say when you noted your when you were trying to get in there with your hand raised. So choose your own adventure here, I guess, Shri.
So, as a bit of context, I took on a new full-time job where I'm now a title that is akin to sales director, where I have to do a lot of traveling and meeting people and talking to them about our company's product and services. And my company knows that I have Parkinson's. They've known it for quite some time before they suggested that I apply for this position. And I was truly shocked because I'm like, you guys have known me for 2 to 3 years, and you know, and you've seen me, and this is not something I said to them, but these are thoughts in my head. You've seen my dyskinesia. You've seen the fact that I have sometimes speech problems. And I honestly don't know if they notice or not. I usually think that people don't notice because they never say anything. And I think sometimes I'm the only one who notices because it's so obvious to me and I feel it throughout my body. But I don't want to say it was an act of love that they encouraged me to apply for this position, but it was an act of, I guess, support in a way, a support of encouragement and belief in my ability to do something, even though I have Parkinson's disease. And so when I went for the interview, I didn't want to bring attention to the fact that I had Parkinson's disease because all my friends were like, don't do that, you're not going to get the job. But I said, I also feel that I have to be honest, even though they already know. I just want to remind them. So they asked me a question. They asked me, are you comfortable speaking in public? On a podium? And I said, absolutely not. I'm not. But since I got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I've been part of the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I do these webinars, so I kind of slid it in that way. So they kind of know, like, I have experience doing this. I've been on a public podium, not for Davis Phinney, but for another organization. But I do this sort of stuff so I can. And that was something that really meant a lot. So I think somebody mentioned in the chat that love can be expressed in other ways than words, like saying I love you. And I believe that. I come from a culture where traditionally we do not go around saying I love you. I was born and raised in America. So I'm in between two cultures. I'm very American, but at the same time, I have a strong connection to my cultural heritage. So when I think it took me like 25 to 30 years to become comfortable saying I love you to my parents. And it's still a little bit weird. It's still like awkward because we show our love in so many other ways, you know, by my mom baking me breakfast or my dad waiting up for me when I get home. And my dad also has Parkinson's disease. He was diagnosed several years after I was, and he's 81 now. So to see him struggle with the disease and go through what he's going through, that's also a different expression of love in my interaction with him. And how I say, Dad, did you take your Parkinson's medication? I mean, that could be also construed as nagging, but nagging is a form of love, I will have to say. And just as another anecdote, I went to the doctor's office yesterday for the end of my medical trial with another university, not another university, just a university. And I was in the bathroom for, I guess, a couple more minutes than I was expected to be. And my friend came in looking for me, which she's never done before. And she said, are you there? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. She said, I just worried that you might have fainted and I didn't know what happened to you because I just was so concerned, like maybe the lumbar puncture did something to you. And she's never done that before because she's never had to. But the fact that she thought of that and just put all the pieces together, that here I had this medical procedure. I was in the bathroom for maybe 2 to 3 minutes extra. Did I faint? Did I pass out? And she proactively came and looked for me. That was very much a sign of love. So I think that's all I have to say.
Beautiful.
Hey, Chris, I just want to add one thing to that speech piece that's not my words. It's actually Davis Phinney's words. But I was on a call with Davis earlier this week and talking about my my fear of not being able to communicate. And Davis said that he has a specific person in his family who takes the role of stopping to say, hey, do you have anything to add to the conversation? Like to watch that. And so I've added that to my list of things where I was saying earlier that I pre-assign people to how I need them to support me when it comes up. I'm now looking for like, how am I going to have that person who's going to be assigned to make sure I'm engaging? Because I also, if I can't engage fast enough, my instinct is to just stop talking and disengage. So I very much feel that. And I really appreciated Davis's words saying, you know, get someone who will have your back and pull you back into the conversation.
Maybe
That's
I'll do that
interesting
for
for-
Robert right now, and I hope this isn't offensive to you, Robert. But Robert, do you have anything you wanted to add to this conversation? I would love it if you had anything you were willing to say and wanted to say.
Well, I was actually just thinking of something that letting people love you is an act of love back to them. And as a person who tends to be very independent and want to do everything myself, and I'm a control freak, so I can do this myself. But letting friends help, people want to help because they do love you, and it's kind of their way of acting in love. Now, I know we've had some comments in the chat about family members who weren't supportive, and that's a different issue. But when you do have family members and friends who are supportive and want to be supportive, let them. And then I also made a comment, a saying that I've adopted, and it came from Steve Gleason, who was a football player who developed ALS, and he's put out a biography recently. And in his biography, he says that he cannot control that he has ALS, but he can control his response to it. And I've adapted that I can't control that I have Parkinson's, but I can control my response to it, and I can control what how I wake up every day, and whether I go exercise or whether I go for a walk or whether I try to have a positive attitude. Some days it is harder, but not to wallow in the bad side and look for the good side is strong for me.
Yeah, Robert, thanks so much for sharing those observations, because I do think that there's a certain way in which you just drew attention to a way that you can sort of claim power for yourself in choosing your responses to circumstances. And I think that's really important. I don't do that well enough, so thank you for the reminder. Speaking of things I don't do well enough, I made a promise at the beginning of last meetup that we were going to try to focus on questions from our audience. So we're going to wrap this topic now, and we'll close down our conversation about love and relationships for now, and jump into some questions from our listeners in our audience right now. I just want to say before I do that our next meetup will be in March, and it'll be March 20th, I believe, the third Thursday. We're always on the third Thursday, and we welcome you to send your questions to us ahead of time. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end of next meetup if we don't have them already today. So thank you for being here.